The anime begins with the protagonist complaining about the shutdown of the servers of the game he had been playing for 3 years. To him, that type of game was worthless, since he was looking for something truly challenging. A game so difficult that it would take at least 10 years to be completed. With this in mind, he decides to search for a hardcore game, known for having terrible balancing. During his search, he ends up finding a suspicious website that advertised a game with no defined ending. As a true game enthusiast, it was obvious that he would enter that site. While browsing through the difficulty options, his eyes are drawn to the so-called Hell mode. This immediately excites him, as it was a level of challenge completely different from anything he had ever seen. After selecting this difficulty, the next step is choosing a class. Among all the available options, he chooses the most complicated one of all, the Summoner class. At the moment he confirms this choice, he discovers that he has been automatically placed in the social class of a servant. As soon as he finishes all the settings, something unexpected happens and he ends up being pulled into the screen of his own computer. Soon after, he awakens in another world, now in the body of a newborn baby. His father holds him in his arms and decides to name him Alan. The scene then moves forward to some time later. He silently reflects that, in his previous life, he was a 35-year-old office worker, burdened with debt, with no talent for relating to other people, and went by the name Kenichi Yamada. However, he had reincarnated into that strange world and was now only 1 year old. Even without being able to speak, he was perfectly capable of understanding everything that was said around him. Alan was born into a family of servants, exactly as described on the game's website. The village where he lived was located near the border, and its inhabitants had to pay taxes to a feudal lord in exchange for the right to cultivate those lands. His father was named Rodden, and his mother went by the name Therja. For now, he was an only child, but he believed that he would soon have a sibling. When they notice that the boy is sleepy, his parents take him to bed. As soon as they leave the room, Alan tries to access his status window, but nothing happens. This irritates him, since he should have possessed summoner abilities from the very beginning. He tries once more, but this time he performs the command only in his mind. Thus, a grimoire finally appears before him. Startled, the baby lets out a scream. His parents immediately rush in to see what had happened. But Alan acts quickly and pretends to be asleep. Convinced that everything is fine, they leave the room. As soon as he is alone again, Alan summons the grimoire once more. Upon opening it, he is able to view his attributes. On another page, he finds detailed information about his summoning and creation abilities. At the moment, he was only capable of summoning insects and animals of rank H. A new page opens, displaying a message from the god of creation, who apologizes for the delay in delivering the grimoire. Ignoring this for now, Alan tries to summon an insect, but fails. Thinking of an alternative, he decides to use the creation ability first. By doing so, he manages to create a grasshopper card. However, before he can attempt to summon it, his mother enters the room. Once again, he pretends to be asleep. After she leaves, Alan realizes that he is extremely tired and decides to leave the summoning for the next day. The following day, everything proceeds normally, with the villagers working in the fields. When he finally manages to be alone, Alan uses his summoning ability and a grasshopper appears before him. He tries to give orders to the insect, but receives no response, which makes him imagine that it might be some kind of game error. He then checks the grasshopper's information in the grimoire and decides to name it Denka. By analyzing its effects, he realizes that the creature granted a 1-point increase in endurance and agility. After several days of training and improving his abilities, Alan finally manages to summon an animal of rank H, a small mouse that is given the name Mousy. Just like Denka, the little mouse was not very intelligent. Even so, at least both of them obeyed when given simple commands. The mouse's ability was running, while the grasshopper's was jumping. By examining the grimoire more carefully, Alan discovers that he could store up to 10 cards of each creature. He learns that the bonuses granted by these cards were extremely important. For example, by storing 10 mouse cards, his attack attribute increased by 10 points. Thanks to this, he already possessed enough strength to easily surpass what any ordinary baby would be capable of. Even so, leveling up and learning new abilities was 100 times more difficult due to the choice of Hell mode. Shortly after, Rodden announces that he has returned, and Alan goes to meet him accompanied by his mother. His father is covered in blood from hunting and explains that he had taken down a massive boar. He then asks if his son would like to see it. The boy, full of excitement, responds positively. After saying their goodbyes, they head to the place where the animal is being cleaned. During the walk, Rodden points to some birds and explains that they were called albagarons. He comments that he chose the name Alan in honor of these creatures, since they could use their wings to fly freely anywhere in the world. Despite this, Derja had become very angry upon discovering that her son's name had been inspired by a monster. Upon arriving at the location, Alan is impressed by the size of the boar. Shortly afterward, Gerda appears. The man shows curiosity upon noticing that Alan had dark hair and eyes, something rare in that region. Alan greets Gerda, which surprises him, as he did not expect such a small child to be so sharp. He comments that his daughter, Krina, was the same age, but was far from showing that level of intelligence. Alan asks if the boar was truly strong. Gerda explains that it was a rank C monster and that at least 20 people were required to defeat it. 10 months pass until Alan finally reaches the second level of summoning. When he checks his statistics, he realizes that he is now capable of calling rank G creatures, and, in addition, his grimoire has unlocked a completely new ability, Summoning Fusion. Excited by the possibilities, he decides to test everything immediately, but soon notices that his MP is completely depleted. Without wasting time, he eats his meal as fast as he can, determined to return quickly to try something different. After recovering, Alan attempts to fuse 2 mice, but discovers that he still does not have enough MP, even with the bar completely full. Confused, he then tries to create a new summoning card, but the result is the same. Frustration takes over as he realizes that, at that moment, the new functions are still out of his reach. Time passes, and the scene shifts to when Alan has already turned 3 years old. His body is now stronger, his MP has increased considerably, and at last, he is able to use all the newly unlocked functions of the grimoire. Without hesitation, he fuses 2 rank G cards and obtains a bird of the same rank as a result. Satisfied, he decides to name it Chappie. The summoning is successful, and Alan feels thrilled as he watches his new companion take shape before him. Chappie possesses the ability to imitate voices, something Alan considers perfect for confusing and deceiving enemies in the future. Soon after, he summons the Frog Hopper and the Mole. Hopper has the ability to provoke opponents, which would be ideal for drawing enemy attention during battle. The Mole, called Molly, has the ability to dig, something perfect for preparing hidden traps in the terrain. While reflecting on the need to better master the abilities of his summons, Alan ends up getting distracted and falls into a hole freshly dug by Molly. The fall reminds him of an important reality. Despite his powers, he is still just a child and will not be facing real enemies anytime soon. When the 3 o'clock bell rings, his worries increase even more. A familiar voice echoes through the area, leaving him uneasy. It is Krita, Gerda's daughter, who has appeared to play warriors with him. Alan knows he cannot treat that confrontation lightly. Krita is extremely fast, and even after he has allocated all of his creature's bonuses into agility, he still has trouble keeping up with her. In the end, she wins the duel by breaking his sword. As evening falls, Alan's parents return home, and Derja's belly is already much bigger. Derja asks Krita to return home, explaining that it is already late. During dinner, Alan tells his father that he would like to accompany him to the farm to help with the harvest. Since his mother is pregnant and will not be able to work, Rodden immediately refuses the suggestion, and Derja agrees with him. Both acknowledge how much Alan has been helping with household chores, but emphasize that he is still very young and should only be concerned with playing. From Alan's point of view, he already has strength comparable to that of an adult and could contribute. Even so, he understands the reason for the refusal. After all, no parent would want to place their own child in such a heavy situation. Derja comments that she saw him throwing stones at a tree behind the house. Alan explains that he was training in case a monster appeared, so he could protect his mother. Deep down, he knows that this was not the real reason, since his true goal was to unlock a new ability. Rodden feels proud upon hearing that his son wants to protect Derja and comments that he can hardly wait to find out what Alan's abilities will be during the evaluation ceremony. Not understanding what that is about, Alan listens as Rodden explains. Upon turning 5 years old, every child participates in a ceremony in which they awaken a class. If they obtain a valuable class, there is a chance to leave behind the life of a servant. A few months pass, winter arrives, and Alan is now capable of maintaining a summon active for an entire day. Shortly afterward, Krina appears once again. As usual, she challenges him to a duel, and once again, Alan ends up defeated. Rodden arrives home, and Derja goes to greet him. At that moment, Denka jumps onto her, causing her to be startled and fall. Derja says that everything is fine, but soon feels intense pain. Rodden asks Krina to go fetch her mother, as the baby is about to be born, and takes Derja to the bed. Meanwhile, Alan takes charge of boiling water. As soon as the water heats up, Krina returns accompanied by her mother, Matilda. She orders the men to leave the room, leaving only the women to help Derja during the childbirth. They wait outside for several hours. As dawn approaches, the cry of a baby finally echoes through the house. Alan now has a brother. Rodden decides to name him Mash, a name that Derja questions, asking whether it was inspired by a monster. Rodden responds only with a smile, confirming that she is right. Watching the joy stamped on everyone's faces, Alan begins to wonder what the reason for his reincarnation was, setting aside the fact that, in his past life, he was merely someone addicted to games who only thought about leveling up. He was nothing more than a lonely worker, trapped in routine and games. There is nothing from that life that he misses. In contrast, he deeply loves the idea of his new family. Even without knowing exactly how he will do it, Alan decides that he will do everything within his power to free his family from the life of servitude. Several years passed, and Alan continued walking alongside his father along one of the roads in the region. As they walked, he showed curiosity and wanted to know how the evaluation ceremony worked. Rodden then explained that it was a very important event, in which everyone had to participate upon turning 5 years old, from servants to nobles. He commented that if someone showed a valuable talent, that person could escape a life of servitude. However, he pointed out that there was a problem. The number of competitors was enormous. Alan found this observation strange and asked why his father thought that way. Rodden then explained that shortly after they settled in that land, families began having children non-stop. As a result, there were now many children about to turn 5 years old, including Alan. In the middle of the conversation, they heard Kreta's voice in the distance along with her father's. Upon noticing this, they decided to all go together. After walking for some more time, they spotted the commoners' village in the distance. When they arrived at the place where the ceremony would be held, Alan observed a large number of servants and commoners gathered. Soon after, the doors of the building opened. 3 members of the church appeared and began to bless everyone, invoking the name of Elmia, the god of creation. The church representatives wished everyone good luck and commented that the kingdom had already had heroes whose origins came directly from servitude. This statement surprised many commoners, who found it difficult to believe. To reinforce her words, the woman cited Clases, the saint, who was born a commoner, and Diverg, the sword lord, who was merely a servant. Upon hearing this, Alan recalled that in the game, classes such as hero and sword lord needed to emerge from lower social classes. Even knowing that this was part of the game's settings, he imagined that this logic also applied to that world. Because of this, he began to understand why everyone, without exception, had to go through the ceremony. The priests then asked everyone to enter. Inside the place, Alan carefully observed the statues of the gods worshipped there. The central statue represented Elmia, the god of creation, which made Alan remember the time when the developers had sent him a letter. Soon after, the evaluation ceremony began. The first to be called was the village chief, Deboji, accompanied by his son, Palomas. The priest asked the boy to place his hand on the crystal ball. As soon as he obeyed, his parameters appeared on a metal plate. The result revealed that he had talent to become a merchant. Deboji was extremely happy and ran to congratulate his son. One after another, the villagers were evaluated. Some showed no talent at all, while another boy manifested the talent of an axe user with a rank A attribute. After many tests, only Alan and Krina remained. The priests called Krina first. The girl ran to the front, visibly excited. The moment she placed her hand on the crystal ball, it began to shine with such intense brightness that it made everyone uneasy. However, the members of the church were delighted when they confirmed the result. Krina possessed the talent of Sword Lord, one of the most powerful classes in existence. The news threw the village into an uproar, as no one expected someone with such talent to appear in such a small place. The girl's father congratulated her with pride. Even so, Krina showed a certain frustration, as she would not become exactly a swordswoman, as she had wished. Alan, on the other hand, remained calm. He had already imagined that something like this would happen, considering the absurd strength she displayed. Without further delay, the priest called Alan. Inside, he felt anxious, believing that everyone would finally discover that he was a summoner. When he placed his hand on the crystal ball, it began to shine intensely, to the point of throwing Alan backward. Everyone around believed that this indicated an extraordinary talent. However, when approaching and asking about the result, the priest informed him, with some regret, that Alan had no talent at all. Alan refused to accept this answer. He approached again and observed his own parameters, realizing that all of them were classified as rank E. Irritated, he began to curse the developers in his mind, complaining that they did not know how to configure the game properly. To him, this was absurd, since no one would be able to perceive that he was a summoner. At that moment, Rodden approached his son and, without touching on the subject, said that it was time to return home, as his mother was waiting. When they arrived, they were received with joy by Derja and Alan's brother. Later, during dinner, his parents talked with him and stated that talents do not define a person's worth, reinforcing that Alan would always be a source of pride for them. Realizing how understanding his parents were, Alan felt grateful to have been born into that family. Then, everyone shared a warm embrace. Later, while everyone was sleeping, Alan began testing his grimoire. He reflected that, on that day, he had learned something important. He was the only one in that world playing on Inferno mode. Since everyone at the ceremony was 5 years old, that meant everyone should show rank E exactly like him. He concluded that the rank system probably indicated how much each person could evolve as they leveled up. Therefore, the reason all of his attributes were rank E must be linked to the fact that, in Inferno mode, his growth was only a fraction of the normal. In this way, the ranks were showing only a minimal part of his true potential. Alan thought that this would leave anyone desperate, but that was not his case. He believed he was in that world to put poorly made games in their proper place. Although, before that, he needed to make the developers fix that ridiculous game. Holding the grimoire, he decided to write a detailed complaint with everything he thought. The next day, Alan went out for a walk alongside his mother. During the stroll, he asked what was going on with his father, since he noticed him acting strangely. Derja explained that he had been like that since he came home late the previous night. Later, they head to Jurda's house, where they will celebrate Krina's talent. The girl speaks excitedly, saying that she discovered her talent is even better than that of a swordswoman. Alan shows surprise and asks if that is really true. Krina continues talking, stating that she will now become even stronger. At that moment, Matilda comments that the village chief stopped by her house and left a liquor for the celebration. Rodden seems pleased with the news, but remembering that he has been annoyed with that family lately, he merely congratulates them and wishes them to enjoy the drink. Jurda then points out that, in that house, guests always drink before the hosts. Noticing his father's behavior, Alan wonders if he might be feeling some kind of jealousy because of the talent issue. Soon after, he dismisses the idea, remembering that Rodden does not usually act that way. At that moment, he hears the two adults begin to argue. Rodden states that Krina's talent is impressive and that it deserves to be celebrated. In response, Jurda demands an explanation as to why he said that they would cut ties with her family. Rodden explains that this is not exactly what he wants, but he believes that since Krina will join the cavalry and serve the country, it would not be appropriate to waste time maintaining closeness with servants. Alan finally understands that his father is trying to do something he considers a favor, even though no one asked for it. Gerda grabs Rodden and comments that it is not something so serious. Rodden insists that it is indeed important. The argument between the two intensifies, making the atmosphere increasingly heavy. Alan asks Krina to try to calm them down. The girl grips her sword, ready to intervene, but before she can do anything, the wives step into the middle of the fight and resolve the situation firmly. With everything apparently settled, Krina goes back to eating normally. Alan then asks Matilda if those arguments are frequent. Matilda replies that they are, but comments that the arrival of the children helped the two become calmer, since in the past they used to resort to physical aggression. The mothers explain that the four adults have been friends since childhood and grew up in the same village. They recall that about 10 years ago, a rumor emerged that a new village would be built. Because of that, they decided to unite and participate together in this project, even discussing as a group the idea of working side by side to build their own houses. They ask if Alan never noticed that all the houses have practically the same shape. The boy replies that he had already noticed that. Rodden then comments that it was easier to build everything at the same time, dividing the tasks among everyone. On a new day, while the parents were busy with work, news arrives that the Order of Knights was looking for Krina. The villagers gather quickly. Among them also appears the boy who has the talent of an axe user. He provokes Alan, asking what someone without talent would be doing there, since people like that would have no place in such a situation. Upon hearing this, Krina gets irritated and tries to move toward him, but her father stops her before anything happens. Suddenly, the village chief announces that the Order of Knights has arrived. People move aside, opening a path. The axe boy is impressed when he realizes that the one who came was the captain himself, a master swordsman. The captain approaches the chief and directly asks for Krina, who is immediately called. Krina and her father step forward. The girl introduces herself enthusiastically before the captain. After observing her carefully, the captain orders her to take part in a duel. Gerda questions this decision, stating that Krina is only 5 years old and has never even wielded a real sword. The captain replies that, being a sword lady, this should not represent any problem. With a cold look, he asks whether they lied during the ceremony and whether someone dared to try to deceive Baron Granvelle. Then, Zenoff calls his vice-captain and orders him to prepare himself. Alan is confused by the situation. The captain then explains to Gerda that falsifying the results of the evaluation ceremony is a crime punishable by death. Therefore, it would be necessary to confirm whether the girl's talent is legitimate. Thus, the fencing duel is officially announced. Everyone around is shocked. Gerda begs for it not to happen. However, the captain makes it clear that if Krina refuses to fight, the entire family will be executed. The girl, in turn, shows no fear at all. Upon seeing a real sword, she becomes excited and tells her father that she will fight. Soon after, she positions herself in front of the vice-captain. Both introduce themselves. The vice-captain's name is Leibrand. Krina advances first, swinging her sword with force. Leibrand tries to counterattack, but Krina blocks the strike. When she almost manages to reach him, the vice-captain uses his feet and, with a kick, throws her against the wall. Gerda and the others become furious and demand that the fight be stopped. Even so, Krina gets up without hesitation and unleashes a special skill. With impressive speed and strength, she charges at Leibrand again. He can do nothing but defend himself until, in a moment of carelessness, Krina breaks his sword. The captain then declares the end of the duel. Krina regains her composure and comments that the fight ended far too quickly. Satisfied, she thanks the vice-captain for the match, while he falls to the ground, completely exhausted. Upon witnessing this scene, Gerda is moved and celebrates together with the soldiers. After seeing all of this, the captain has no more reason to doubt. He approaches Gerda, praises his upbringing, and states that he raised a true sword lady. He then apologizes for having doubted them and invites them to eat and talk about his daughter's future, also allowing them to bring their friends. Thus, everyone heads to the residence of the city chief. The atmosphere remains tense. Alan wonders why the axe boy and his father decided to follow them, but ends up setting that aside, taking advantage of the opportunity to take some fruits to his home. At that moment, the captain begins to speak, introduces himself as Zenoff, and explains that he was sent by order of his lord to confirm whether a true sword lord really existed there. With that visit, it becomes clear that everything was true. When addressing the village chief, the captain comments that, initially, that village located on the frontier would receive his name once it was fully established. However, now that it has been confirmed that a sword lord was born there, his lord decided that the place should be named in honor of this event, becoming known as Krina Village. The village chief does not question the decision and accepts it promptly. He then explains to the villagers the reason why he allowed Krina to be subjected to such a harsh trial. He tells them that 3 years earlier, a sword lord was born into a count's family and even came to serve the royal family. However, that person's performance fell far below expectations. After a new evaluation, they discovered that the supposed special talent was nothing more than a common swordsman talent. After that case, the kingdom realized that several members of the nobility had inflated or falsified their talents. For that reason, they decided to carefully review all the results of the evaluation ceremonies. Turning to Gerda, the captain apologizes once again for having placed his daughter in that situation. He asks Gerda to continue taking care of her and to help her develop, so that when she turns 12, she can study at the academy and, in the future, serve the royal family directly. Alan is surprised when he hears that. At that moment, the axe boy asks whether anyone could enter that academy and become a knight. The boy's father immediately scolds him, telling him to behave, and apologizes to the captain. Zenoff explains that, in the future, an instructor will be sent to the village and suggests that the boy devote himself to his studies in order to try to earn a place at the academy. Hearing this, Krina comments to Alan that he should study together with them as well. Alan replies that he intends to do so. The axe boy, however, reacts with laughter, saying that Alan would not have sufficient ability. Krina immediately steps forward to defend him. Alan, in turn, reacts with complete indifference, since in his mind, he is nothing more than a 40-year-old adult living in that body. The captain then carefully observes Alan's dark hair and eyes and asks who he is. Rawdon replies that he is his son, and Gerda reinforces the introduction. Upon hearing Rawdon's name, the captain shows surprise and asks if he is the same Rawdon known as the Boar Hunter. He then stands up and apologizes for having been so rude to someone considered a legend in that village. Rawdon becomes confused and asks what he is talking about. The captain explains that the Baron greatly appreciates the boar meat sent by the village every winter. According to what he has heard, Rawdon is the one who always takes on the most dangerous part of the hunts, being seen by many as a true local hero. The captain asks Rawdon to accept that as a compliment, both from the Baron and from himself. Hearing all of this, Alan cannot help but think that his father is someone truly impressive. Later, while they were returning home, Rawdon shares an important lesson with his son. Even though they are only servants, they can still be recognized by important people. He asks Alan to never give up and to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult the work may be. Alan comments that his father was recognized by someone important. He also mentions that he picked some fruits to take to his mother and his brother, asking if that had been wrong. Rawdon simply laughs at the question, showing that he did the same and even took a larger amount. Some time passes, and Alan is visibly excited, as he has finally managed to reach level 3 in summoning. He opens the grimoire carefully and realizes that he now possesses the enhancement skill, capable of strengthening his summons, in addition to having unlocked rank F summons. While analyzing this, he begins to reflect on what might happen if he tried to fuse his summons at this new stage, imagining whether something grand, like a dragon, could emerge. Even though he is curious, he decides to leave these tests for another time. That same night, Alan has dinner together with his family. During the meal, it becomes clear that Derja is expecting another child. Upon feeling the baby's light movements, Alan comments that he believes it might be a girl. Rawdon begins to think about possible names, but Derja reminds him that they had both agreed that, if it were a girl, she would be responsible for choosing the name. At that exact moment, the system alerts Alan that his MP is completely full. Without realizing it, Alan ends up mentally reading the creator's name, Elmia. His parents quickly scold him, explaining that one should not mention the name of a god carelessly. Derja then asks what is going on with him. since his behavior has been strange throughout the entire day. To avoid the subject, Alan shifts the focus of the conversation and asks his father about his arm, noting that the old scar had disappeared. Rawdon explains that this happened because he went through the trial of the gods during the boar hunt carried out earlier. According to him, it is a special moment in which an intense wave of energy runs through the body, healing wounds and eliminating accumulated fatigue. Upon hearing this, Alan understands that it referred to leveling up. He acknowledges that his father is experienced in boar hunting and, even without being able to visualize his statistics, he is sure that Rawdon must already be at a fairly high level. Despite his summoning ability having evolved, Alan knows that he is still only at overall level 1, and that the only way to gain experience is by defeating monsters. However, servants cannot leave the village without authorization, except when they participate in hunts. With this in mind, Alan expresses out loud his desire to participate in a hunt. Rawdon responds firmly, making it clear that this is not a game, and that such a decision can put lives at risk. After hearing his father's answer, Alan walks away in silence, thinking only about how much he wants to become stronger. Later, Alan decides to check the message sent by the developers. In it, they explain that the error in the text was corrected and that the reason all of his statistics appeared as rank E is related to the difficulty mode he chose in the game. In addition, they sent a file containing the raw data of his statistics. Upon analyzing them, Alan discovers that he has an S ranking in MP and intelligence, while the other attributes are at the same level as Krina's. This leaves him satisfied, as he realizes that all the effort he has put in so far has not been in vain. Without wasting time, he decides to test the enhancement skill on Denka. As a result, Denka receives an increase in agility and endurance. Excited, Alan decides to summon him to see him in person, noticing that his appearance has changed a little. This excites him, but his excitement does not last long, as his mother suddenly appears and, startled, ends up stepping on Denka. The next day, Rawdon says goodbye to go out on another hunt. Alan, on the other hand, keeps thinking about what he could do throughout the day. After hanging out the clothes, he begins trying new combinations of creatures, but none of them result in an unprecedented summoning card. Then, a different idea emerges, combining an insect with a bird. From this attempt, a new herb-type card of rank F is born. At first, this leaves him a little disappointed. However, when analyzing the characteristics of the new summon, he realizes that it has an MP bonus. This buff is extremely useful to him, as it will allow him to carry out many more activities in a single day. Even knowing that leveling up can take decades, he remains optimistic and decides to summon it. Thus, a little creature with an appearance similar to an apple appears. Alan decides to call it a Poe. Next, he starts to wonder what ability that summon possessed. At that moment, a Poe reveals its status, and Alan discovers that its ability is called Aroma. Without fully understanding what that means, he asks a Poe to use it. A Poe then buries itself in the ground and makes a small plant sprout. When he senses the smell that spreads, Alan notices an aroma similar to that of essential oil. At that moment, his mother approaches and thanks him for taking care of the clothes. Alan asks a Poe to return to card form, but the creature does not obey. Derja notices the sprout on the ground and seems a little surprised, but upon sensing the pleasant aroma, she ends up not giving it much importance. Later, Alan begins to train with Krina. As usual, he ends up being defeated. Even so, the girl comments that he has been getting stronger in recent times. This surprises Alan. When reviewing his statistics, he realizes that both his sword skill and his endurance have increased. He begins to wonder whether a Poe's aroma ability might have some effect in combat, or if it influences things in some other way. At that moment, Alan also remembers that Fido, his wolf summon, has an ability called Bite. He thinks about testing it on someone, but soon concludes that it would not be a good idea to try that with Krina. The girl notices his distraction and asks if something is wrong. Alan replies that it is nothing. After that, he begins training by throwing stones at the trunk of a tree. Mash, who was nearby, comments that it looks boring. Alan asks him to wait a little. Meanwhile, he thinks that he now has many more responsibilities, since he needs to take care of his younger sibling and help his mother, who is pregnant, with household chores. He even considers abandoning the stone throwing training. But he does not want to give up, as he feels that he is very close to leveling up. When he was about to throw another stone, his brother asks about the trees that are growing near the house. Alan realizes that Apo has practically created a small garden around the place. He explains that Apo's aroma ability reduced the MP recovery time from 6 hours to 5. Later, during the night, Alan begins to show concern, as his father still has not returned. Derja also finds the situation strange, since Rodden had said he would hunt near the village. Shortly after, they both hear distant shouts, urging Rodden to hold on. Without wasting time, everyone goes out to see what is happening and soon discovers that Rodden has been seriously injured, being carried by the other hunters. Already inside the house, Gerda explains that Rodden's abdomen was pierced by a boar's tusk. Alan notices that the wound was cauterized, with no apparent bleeding. Gerda then clarifies that they only managed to keep him alive thanks to the use of an extremely rare medicinal herb, the Mueller's flower. Derja, surprised, asks how they managed to obtain something so valuable, and Gerda says that she bought the herb using the money the knights gave as an apology for the test applied to Krina. One of the hunters claims that all of this happened because of a commoner. The others agree with him and begin to suggest that they should go complain. In the middle of the commotion, Mash wakes up and, upon seeing his father in that state, begins to cry desperately. Alan picks him up and carries him away to calm him down. Shortly after, the others decide to leave and let them be alone. Taking advantage of the moment when there is no one else around, Alan asks Gerda what really happened and why they were blaming the commoners. Gerda explains that, a few days earlier, everyone had been summoned by the village chief, who requested authorization for the commoners to participate in the boar hunt. Alan asks the reason for this, and Gerda explains that boar meat has great value. Although most of it goes to the Baron, the remainder is divided among the hunters, who usually trade this meat for salt, firewood, and other essential daily items. However, bringing down a boar is not a simple task, and for that reason commoners rarely volunteer to participate in the hunts. Even so, a rumor arose that there was a hero among the servants. For a moment, Alan believes they were talking about Krina. However, Gerda clarifies that the comment was about Rodden. He remembers that Captain Zinnoff had already referred to Rodden as a legend, and that over time this ended up being treated almost like an official title. In this way, everyone came to believe that the commoners would be safe during the hunt as long as Rodden was present. Both Gerda and Rodden did not feel comfortable with this decision, but they had no way to oppose the village chief's order. Because of that, they ended up accepting it. During the training sessions, most of the commoners refused to truly participate. When the day of the hunt arrived, they were given the task considered the simplest, drawing the boar's attention. However, fear got the better of them, and they abandoned their positions. As a result, Rodden ended up getting injured while trying to protect one of them. Gerda comments that, fortunately, they managed to defeat the boar in the end, and that the next day she would bring the portion of meat that would belong to Rodden. Before leaving, she asks Alan and Derja to stay strong and move forward. Alan and his mother spend the entire night tending to Rodden's injuries. When he finally wakes up, relief takes over everyone. Seeing his father in that state makes Alan feel deeply guilty, as he realizes that he had been treating this new life merely as a game, while the people of that world struggled every day to survive. Shortly after, Gerda returns bringing the meat. Rodden apologizes, saying that he ended up becoming a burden to the family. Alan, with a determined expression, asks them not to worry about it and states that he will take care of everyone. Early in the morning, he goes to fetch water from the well. Despite the adults' warning that it is too heavy, Alan carries the buckets without showing any difficulty, surprising everyone with his strength. Back at home, Alan comments that he decided to invest all of his bonus points into physical attributes, giving up MP points because his family came first. Next, he accompanies Gerda to harvest potatoes and pulls them out of the ground with ease, leaving him quite impressed. Upon finishing the work, Alan complains about how little he receives and, at that moment, begins to understand just how difficult a servant's life is. Later, the village chief appears accompanied by a commoner, bringing some fruit and wishing Rodden a speedy recovery. The commoner steps forward, apologizes, and shows remorse for what happened. Rodin forgives him, but Therja does not accept it so easily, reminding them that the mistake almost cost her husband's life. Next, other servants also arrive bringing gifts. Alan, moved, thinks that he truly has the best parents he could ever wish for. After that, Alan goes to a field and clears part of the land. Then, he summons several frogs and sets up some traps. He then asks the frogs to use the provoke ability, hoping to attract wild birds or even ducks. But nothing appears. When he was about to give up, a huge bird appears in Albagarens, a rank B beast. The creature immediately begins to eliminate his summons. Alan tries to flee, but the system informs him that he has just reached level 2 simply because his frogs had faced the monster. Realizing this, he decides to fight. Picking up a stone, he uses all the throwing practice he has been doing to strike the bird's head. Then, he charges in with his sword, but even so, he cannot defeat the creature. He then summons the canine patrol, which attacks using their bite abilities, but it is still not enough. The Albagarens knocks him to the ground, and Alan realizes that his strength is decreasing rapidly, since he loses his buffs whenever one of his summons is defeated. Exhausted, he falls to the ground, trying only to avoid being devoured. Alan summons some larvae, which quickly latch onto the monster's neck and begin draining its energy. With that, he manages to free himself and, without wasting time, calls his hunting dogs along with even more larvae. In this way, Alan ends the fight by delivering a sword strike to the Albagaren's head. Soon after, the grimoire appears, informing him that he defeated an Albagaren and received 100 experience points. Alan celebrates, thinking that it was more rewarding than he had imagined. Next, he returns to his family, bringing the bird with him, but makes up a story, saying that he defeated the monster by catching it off guard. Everyone is impressed. His father asks if he was hurt, and Alan replies that he is fine. Gerda shows surprise upon learning that he defeated that monster using only a wooden sword and a few stones, but soon notices bite marks on the bird and asks if Alan bit it. The boy says he is not sure, as he was fighting driven only by survival instinct. Gerda accepts the explanation without questioning it and tells Rodin that she will be responsible for bleeding the bird. Alan notices the bump on Gerda's head and imagines that Krina hit him while they were playing knights. After that, Gerda takes Alan to help him deal with the Albagaren and explains that, of the 60 kilograms the bird has, after the blood is drained only 20 kilograms remain. Even so, only half of that can be consumed. The wings, however, have great value. Alan is very happy that Gerda is willing to teach him all of that. Gerda continues explaining that 60% of the beast will still be allocated to the upper class. It is a shame, but this rule also applies to wild monsters, with the exception of rank E ones, such as horned rabbits. Soon after, Gerda removes the magic stone from the beast's body. He comments that magic stones above rank D are subject to taxation, but that would not be a problem, since those stones would have no use for them. Gerda also explains that a boy like Alan would only be hunting monsters of that type because his father is injured. For that reason, he intends to use this as an argument to negotiate a larger share with the village chief. Upon hearing this, Alan gets an idea and shares it with Gerda. The scene then shifts to the village chief's house. They take the beast there and explain that Alan risked his own life to hunt the bird since his father could not do it. This moves Deboji. Gerda asks if they can keep the beast, but Deboji replies that they cannot, as the Baron has been demanding more and more meat. Hearing this, Alan deduces that this must be the reason why the commoners were authorized to participate in the hunt. In response, Gerda proposes handing over the wings and the magic stone, but Deboji still does not seem satisfied. Then Gerda explains the difficult situation that Rodin's family is going through. Alan also joins the conversation, saying that he is very hungry and pretending to almost faint. With that, they manage to convince Deboji to allow them to keep the bird. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Alan asks if he can keep all the birds he hunts, as long as he always hands over the wings and the magic stone to Deboji. Jurda realizes the boy's intention and comments that it is dangerous for a child to continue hunting monsters. Hearing this, Deboji concludes that it would be difficult for a child to defeat an Albageran frequently, and thus authorizes them to keep the meat. With the situation resolved, Alan returns to the field to hunt more Albagerans. Using the same strategy, he manages to lure 2 birds and defeats them in the same way as the previous one. Alan comments that he usually hunts once every 3 days, and that this was the first time he did not lose any summons. The grimoire then informs him that he received 200 experience points, reaching the total necessary to advance to level 2. Alan immediately opens his status window and realizes that his statistics have increased, although only 60% due to the Inferno difficulty. Even so, he is very happy, especially since it took him 6 years to finally level up. Upon returning home, he shows the hunts to his father. Rodden is surprised, especially when Alan comments that he defeated the 2 birds at the same time. Rodden notices something strange, but prefers not to say anything. Soon after, Alan hears the bells and understands that it is already time to play knights with Krina. During the play, Alan shows himself to be much more agile, dodging and blocking attacks with ease. While fighting, he thinks that he needs to dry the birds' meat for the winter and then trade part of it for firewood. He also considers taking advantage of the presence of the Albagerans to hunt 20 more and reach level 3, even knowing that it would be difficult to do so before the end of the year. Because he is distracted, Krina finds an opening and lands a blow on his head. At the end of the fight, the girl says goodbye, saying that she will return another day. Later, that night, Alan decides to tell his parents something important. He reveals that, when he was 1 year old, he received a divine oracle. As expected, his parents are shocked. His father asks if it was the god Amiya, and Alan confirms, repeating the words he heard, that he would receive wisdom and strength. Derja does not quite understand, so Alan explains that, apparently, he is more intelligent than others and a little stronger physically. In addition, he would face trials that not even 100 men could overcome. Upon hearing this, his parents are frightened, and Derja begs God for mercy. Rodden comments that day, Alan must have overcome one of those trials, since he noticed that the scar on his face had disappeared. Alan is surprised that he noticed this, and Rodden explains that he knows very well what the trials of the gods are like. Confused, his mother asks about the ritual of the evaluation ceremony from the previous year. Alan replies that he received an oracle from Elmia 2 months ago explaining that, according to the oracle, his characteristics were evaluated as low due to the slow progress of his tests. In addition, the reason no talent appeared is because his talent is something completely new. Rodden shows interest and asks what this talent is, but Alan replies that he still does not know. In his thoughts, he apologizes to his father, since telling the truth now could lead some people to draw the wrong conclusions upon discovering that he can summon and control creatures. At that moment, his mother approaches and hugs him, quite worried about not knowing how much he had been striving to overcome Elmia's trials. His father asks what he intends to do from now on. Alan replies that he will continue striving to pass all the tests. Rodden already expected that answer and asks him not to hesitate to ask for help if he needs it. He also asks Alan not to tell anyone else about this, as they might think he is a false prophet, commenting that he will only allow Jurda to know, since he is always boasting about his daughter being a sword lord. Alan agrees, saying that he can tell Jurda. The scene moves to winter. During this period, Alan was already 6 years old and was busy cutting the Albageran meat. While watching the boy work, Jurda comments that he always knew Alan was not an ordinary child, but never imagined that he had been blessed and put to the test by a god. After that, the two head to the city. On the way, Jurda asks if this is Alan's first time negotiating supplies. Alan confirms that it is. Jurda then comments that it was a great decision for him to have stored the Albageran meat. Alan takes the opportunity to praise Jurda, saying that he managed to get a large amount of boar meat. Jurda replies that, since the commoners stopped participating in the hunts, everything has been working better. Hearing this, Alan asks what exactly the difference was between them and the commoners. Jurda explains that the main difference was social status and taxes. Since the commoners did not pay 60% in taxes like they did, Instead, every year the commoners had to pay 3 gold coins per adult and 1 per child. This information catches Alan's attention, and he soon asks if there was any way to become a commoner. Gerda replies that this was possible by paying 10 gold coins per family member, but that it could also be granted as a direct reward from the Baron. Alan does the calculations mentally and comes to the conclusion that, for his family to achieve that status, 50 gold coins would be necessary, especially considering that there was a new member about to be born. Shortly after, they arrive at a shop and trade part of the meat for salt. Then they visit a fruit shop. Over time, Alan begins to frequent the market on his own. Everything he learns during these visits he carefully records in his grimoire. In this way, he discovers that 1 gold coin is equivalent to 100 silver, that 1,000 copper coins correspond to 10,000 iron. From this, he concludes that, to gather 50 gold coins, it would be necessary to hunt 500 albigarons. Even thinking the number is excessive, he considers it acceptable, since he has always been used to playing on the hardest mode. Soon after, Alan enters a potion shop and asks if there is any potion capable of recovering MP. The merchant replies that he does not deal with that kind of sophisticated potion. Then Alan asks if there is anything that can heal wounds, and the seller points to some plants displayed in the place. Alan approaches them and draws them in his grimoire. Driven by curiosity, he asks which of those plants is the Mueller's flower. The seller replies that he does not have any, and that, even if he did, he would not give any discount, commenting that he was still frustrated with the last one he sold. That flower had been sold precisely to Gerda about a month earlier. The seller explains that Gerda was extremely insistent. The flower cost 5 gold coins, but he even went so far as to beg on his knees for it to be sold for 3 coins, claiming that he needed to save a friend. Faced with such insistence, he ended up giving in. Even so, for him, it had been a terrible deal, since he lost 2 gold coins. Upon learning that Gerda did that because of his father, Alan hands the seller a package of albigaran meat and explains that that flower was responsible for saving his father's life. Alan also comments that, when he came back next time, he would bring even more meat for the merchant. As he leaves the shop, Alan notices a shelf where there was a weapon for sale for 50 silver coins. At that moment, Dagora, who was accompanied by the village chief's son, asks aggressively what Alan wanted in his family's shop. Alan ignores the provocation and moves on, but Dagora pushes him and demands that he become his lackey. Alan gets irritated, but thinks that PvP did not yield experience, so it was not worth it. Even so, he draws his sword just to intimidate him, challenging the boy who wielded the axe to a duel. Dagora accepts the challenge and goes to fetch his weapon, asking Palomas to keep an eye on Alan to make sure he does not run away. When he returns, he charges forward holding a club. Alan acknowledges that Dagora was strong, but in his mind he judges that it was nowhere near Krina's level. With ease, Alan manages to disarm him and ends the fight quickly. Before leaving, he tells Dagora that one day he would return to do business at that shop. Later, already at home, Rodin begins removing the bandages, boasting that he was completely recovered. Derja asks him to be careful, warning that she did not want to see him injured again. The next day, Alan goes to Krina's house. There, he trains with Dagora, while Krina practices with her younger brother. During the training, Alan notices that she is taking it easy on her brother. At a certain moment, Dagora tries to attack Alan by surprise, but he manages to dodge without difficulty. At the end of the training, everyone returns to their homes. Later, during the night, Alan remains silent, watching his mother as she puts his little sister, Mila, to sleep. At that moment, Rodin and Gerda arrive. Rodin comments that the village chief had summoned them and decided to increase the hunting quota from 10 to 15 boars. This meant that, from now on, the commoners would also be required to participate. Derja shows that she does not like the idea at all, but Rodin clarifies that these were direct orders from the Baron. Gerda adds something even more worrying. If the quota were not met, new servants would be recruited. Alan quickly understands the scale of the problem. With more servants, there would be less land available for each family, and some might even lose their land, especially those that did not contribute to the hunt. In addition, Gerda warns that the following year the quota would rise to 20 boars. Verja considers this absurd, thinking that doubling the number of boars meant doubling the risk. Even so, Rodden insists that the Lord of the Lands did not care about the servants' opinions. Alan comments that, even if they managed to meet the quota, the Baron would probably increase the number again in the following years, until it became impossible, resulting in the need to recruit even more servants. For that reason, he suggests that the participation of the commoners would be indispensable. Gerda completely opposes the idea, saying that she did not want to take dead weight along. Alan replies that, if they were useless, all that was needed was to make them useful. In his mind, he recalls the experience he gained playing various games on hard difficulty, knowing exactly how to integrate someone with no experience into a group and allow them to grow safely. He states that he possesses the wisdom granted by the god Elmia and asks that they leave this matter in his hands. The scene then changes to Alan, Rodden, and Gerda arriving at the place where they would meet with the group of commoners. Rodden makes it clear that, this time, the hunt would follow the plan created by Alan. Although Alan would only be observing everything from the outside, he had decided to help train the novices because he did not want anyone else to end up getting hurt like his father had in the past. The group then leaves the city, and Alan feels excited, since it was the first time he had left the village. As he walked, he observed the White Dragon Mountain Range, a place shrouded in stories and legends, where it is said that the legendary White Dragon lives, a beast known for its absurd strength. Upon arriving at the hunting grounds, Rodden orders everyone to take their positions. It does not take long before two servants manage to lure a boar. Gerda's group positions itself at the front, holding back the creature's advance with their spears, while Rodden's group advances along the flanks. At that moment, Alan orders the commoners to take action. This way, they are also able to participate in the hunt and gain experience, leveling up. Everyone is surprised by the sensation caused by the divine trial, something completely new to them. Just as Alan had predicted, the plan worked perfectly, allowing the commoners to evolve. Even so, he notices, with a certain frustration, that he did not gain any experience simply by commanding the attack. The next morning, while Alan was drawing water from the well, he was talking with some servants. One of them comments that his wife was pregnant and says that he felt grateful, since he now had plenty of work cleaning boars. Upon hearing this, Alan gets an idea and invites him to go to his house. Once there, Alan proposes that the servant be responsible for butchering the Albageran, offering 2 meat potions for each one that was prepared. The servant gets excited about the proposal and accepts immediately. Meanwhile, Alan thinks to himself that those Albageran would not be used for personal consumption, but rather for sale at the butcher shop. After all, in order to turn his family into commoners, he needed to gather 50 gold coins. Later, Alan sets out on another hunt. This time, 4 commoners are part of the group. He reflects that if they continued gradually increasing the number of commoners, it would soon be possible to divide the team into 2 groups, which would make the hunts much more efficient. Just like before, the boar is lured in. Gerda's group holds the attack from the front, while Rodden's group advances from the sides. Finally, the commoners take action, delivering blows to secure experience. This time, however, Alan also gains experience and levels up to level 3. Shortly before, he had summoned the grasshopper Denka, who ended up being trampled by the boar. Even so, Alan receives experience for having contributed to the fight. 3 months pass, and Alan returns with Krina from the village chief's house, where they had gone to celebrate the new year. Upon arriving at Gerda's house, Rodden asks how the visit had been. Alan replies that it was good, but comments that it would have been even better if Gerda and his father had gone as well. Gerda responds that she prefers to celebrate at home. While they were eating, he asks whether the village chief had thanked them for the group reaching the goal of 15 boars. Alan confirms, and Rodden adds that if they kept going like that, they would even reach the goal of 20 boars that same year, all thanks to his son's plan to train the commoners. After a while, Gerda draws attention to a bottle behind Alan. He explains that it was a wine he had received as a gift from the village chief. Noticing his interest, Alan changes the subject, pretending not to notice. Even so, Gerda and her father insist, reminding him that children cannot drink. Then, Alan says that he can hand over the wine, but only if they managed to defeat him in a competition. Otherwise, if he won, he wanted to take part in the next boar hunt. Rodden accepts the challenge, and Alan announces that the contest would be an arm wrestling match. Gerda is the first to compete. Alan thinks to himself that he was already at level 6 and had concentrated all of his reinforcements on strength. Because of that, he defeats Gerda without any difficulty. However, when it is time to face Rodden, Alan ends up being defeated. While they were drinking, Alan reflects that Gerda must be around rank D, while her father seemed to be at rank C. He becomes visibly discouraged, but Rodden notices and says that he did not need to be sad, stating that Alan was not weak. Rodden also promises that when Alan managed to defeat him, he would allow him to participate in the hunt. Alan feels encouraged by this promise, since he believes that upon reaching level 4 in summoning, he would probably be able to defeat his father. Some time later, when Alan had already turned 7 years old, his summoning finally reaches level 4. With that, he gains the ability to summon rank E creatures. However, since this is a new type of summoning, he understands that he first needs to synthesize these creatures. In addition, another function ends up being unlocked at the same time: storage. Curious, Alan tests this new feature and quickly learns how to use the storage space. Even so, he finds it strange that this function has appeared now, since, in games, this type of feature usually only appears when it truly becomes necessary. Later, he begins trying to generate rank E insects, but nothing happens. At that moment, the grimoire manifests and explains that, to create insects of that level, rank E magic stones are required. Alan pauses for a moment and remembers that he has some of those stones stored away. Being careful not to make any noise, he enters the house without waking his sister and takes the magic stones that he had hidden together with the coins he had been saving. He tries once again to perform the insect summoning, but still does not succeed. Thinking of another possibility, he decides to place the crystal inside the item box. This time, the result is different. A butterfly is summoned. To his surprise, it is considerably larger than the other creatures he had summoned up until then. The scene changes, and Alan finds himself face to face with a saber-toothed tiger, which is also part of his rank E summons. He tries to create new cards by fusing the butterfly with the tiger, but the attempt fails. Then, he remembers the item box once again and decides to place the crystals there before trying one more time. This way, he manages to create a bird. Later, during the night, Alan talks with his father and asks about the horned rabbits. His father replies that he no longer needed to worry about those creatures, since they had dug trenches around the village, preventing the rabbits from getting close. Upon hearing this, Alan is not pleased at all with the news, feeling a discomfort that he cannot quite explain. The next morning, while they are training together, Alan asks Palomas about the magic stones. Palomas explains that these stones are located near the hearts of magical beasts and are usually used as a power source for magical tools. He also comments that rank D or C magic stones are highly valued in the royal capital, while rank E ones are seen as something worthless, to the point that they are often found discarded on the ground. The following day, Alan had already gathered a large number of magic stones, as he asked the villagers for help in looking for them. Thanks to this, he manages to generate all the rank E cards. At that moment, a strong gust of wind ends up carrying away one of his cards, which causes his bird to be summoned suddenly. The creature immediately conveys a warning of danger. A boar appears charging at full force and ends up knocking Alan to the ground. Before something worse can happen, one of his cards activates a healing ability, restoring his injuries. The boar charges again, but the butterfly releases a stunning powder, creating an opening for the tiger to attack and finish off the creature. Soon after, a second boar appears, but Alan uses his defense card and manages to defeat it. Then, everything returns to normal, and Alan realizes that he had only imagined that entire situation. Throughout all the time he has spent in this game, he has reflected countless times on the true role of a summoner and on how to fight in the best possible way to draw out the maximum potential of this class's abilities. Now, he clearly understands that each summoned creature has a well-defined function. Insect-type creatures are responsible for weakening enemies. Beast-type creatures handle direct attacks. Bird-type creatures are used to gather information and transmit messages. Plant-type creatures are focused on healing. Stone-type creatures, on the other hand, have the function of defense. With this combination, Alan realizes that he can carry out tasks that would normally require an entire group. For him, this is the true meaning of being a summoner. Regardless of the situation, it is about commanding a force capable of advancing without stopping and facing any opponent. This is the power of a summoner who can, one day, surpass even the Demon King. And so we finish the 5th episode of the anime, Hell Mode, the Hardcore Gamer. If you want the continuation of the next episodes, leave it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep catching the upcoming videos. See you next time.